Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Alex. I'm Jim Byron. I'm the president and CEO of the Richard Nixon Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all back to the Nixon Library. I want to start tonight by recognizing a special friend, Charlie Zhang, a member of our board of directors and the treasurer of the Nixon Foundation. We also have a number of special friends and supporters in the audience, and I particularly want to thank all of our President's Council and Associates Club supporters for your generosity that makes possible programs like this, programs that support American civics. So thank you for what you do. And if you're not a member, but you want to support programs like this, we invite you to pick up a membership brochure in our gift shop or go to nixonfoundation.org. You can be in touch with one of our development associates. There's two special upcoming events that I want to make sure that you all know about, beginning with the Foundation's inaugural Grand Strategy Summit, which is going to take place in Washington, D.C. So if anyone wants to take a trip to D.C., I'm serious. We're offering a special presidential VIP experience. You can go to grandstrategysummit.com, November 10 and 11, so it's right after the midterms. So you can be in D.C. during all of that interesting time. And we're going to do something unique. Over 2 days, we're going to gather some of the foremost foreign policy thinkers from a totally nonpartisan, bipartisan perspective, and really hope to coalesce around a cohesive American foreign policy for the future. That's what President Nixon was all about. It's one of his strong suits, of course, in foreign policy. So we hope to bring that back to the forefront of American policy. So we invite all of you to be with us, grandstrategysummit.com on November 10 and 11. I also want to tell you about the Nixon National Cancer Conference, which is one of our newer signature events, which took place in this very room last December. It was so well received that we're going to do it again. And so we're bringing together some of the foremost thought leaders in cancer research, treatment, and care, because President Nixon, I bet you didn't know this, President Nixon signed the National Cancer Act in 1971, 51 years ago. And so for the first time, the federal government allocated $1.4 billion of federal money to fighting cancer, to understanding the underlying mechanisms of cancer. So we celebrate what President Nixon did 51 years ago, and we're going to carry on that legacy by convening the Nixon National Cancer Conference. So we invite you to be with us and join us for that. Again, you can get all the details at nixonfoundation.org. So we got some great programs. But tonight, it is my pleasure to welcome Ambassador Nikki Haley back to the Nixon Library and to Orange County. The ambassador is the author of If You Want Something Done, a brand new bestseller celebrating iconic women leaders from whom the ambassador has derived particular inspiration, and it's already becoming required reading. In just a few minutes, Ambassador Haley will appear in conversation with Blake Kernan, a friend to the Nixon Foundations and a published author, Senate staffer, and nonprofit director. Blake has been passionate about the intersection of politics and journalism from a very young age. Since she published her book, Your Teacher Said What? Defending Our Kids from the Assault on Capitalism, with her father, CNBC's Joe Kernan, when she was only 11 years old. She has been featured across cable and network news, and has been a keynote speaker at Harvard Business School, the Adam Smith Society, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and she recently graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with her BA in political science, so she is quite an accomplished person. Of course, Ambassador Haley served as a legislator in South Carolina, in the South Carolina House of Representatives, before being elected governor of South Carolina in 2011, becoming the first female minority governor in United States history. In 2017, she was appointed U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, where she served until 2019. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Ambassador Nikki Haley and Blake Kernan.
Nikki Haley made history, taking the oath of office to become the first woman to serve as governor of South Carolina.
I think my differences have always had people underestimate me, and I think that's the fun I have, is in going and proving them wrong.
When a challenge comes in, I'm so overprotective of the state that I just work. That's all I know to do is work, and I don't stop until I feel like things are taken care of.
If you can give a person a job, you take care of a family, and we watched a lot of families get taken care of over the past couple of years.
President-elect Trump has asked South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley to be his ambassador to the United Nations, and she's accepted. The daughter of Indian immigrants is considered a rising star in the Republican Party. Haley would be the first woman appointed to Trump's cabinet.
For anyone
that says you can't get anything done at the UN, they need to know there's a new sheriff in town.
There is a new U.S. UN.
You are going to see a change in the way we do business. For those that don't have our back, we're taking names.
If for any reason North Korea attacks the United States or our allies, the U.S. will respond, period.
She's so tough and she's so consistent. And you just know you're not going to move her.
America will put our embassy in Jerusalem. That is what the American people want us to do. And it is the right thing to do. No vote in the United Nations will make any difference on that.
What we witnessed here today in the Security Council is an insult. It won't be forgotten.
I like the message that Nikki sent yesterday at the United Nations.
This was the finest hour for Nikki Haley, I think. Standing up for the United States, standing up for Israel.
Standing her ground, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley making it clear.
I will not shut up. Rather, I will respectfully speak some hard truths.
Nikki Haley delivered absolute fire and brimstone. She dropped it right on the head of the Russian ambassador.
Ambassador Nikki Haley, who is really going after the Russians. She gives the evil eye.
So Haley shows us what American foreign policy looks like with the spy.
I wear heels. It's not for a fashion statement. It's because if I see something wrong, we're going to kick them every single time. We have to put forth real solutions to our country's problems, and we have to restore the people's belief that America is worth fighting for. America is the greatest force for good in human history, and we should never be ashamed to say that.
The biggest reason socialism is gaining ground is because capitalism's defenders are too afraid to speak up. We can't keep quiet. The truth matters, and it's time to tell it.
America is too nice. Too nice. Stop being nice to these thugs and these tyrants that want to kill us. We're not going to throw cotton balls at them. We're going to throw a grenade.
Here's what I just learned. Don't make Nikki Haley mad.
And if this president signs any sort of deal, I'll make you a promise. The next president will shred it on her first day in office. Just saying, sometimes it takes a woman.
Really special. Thank you guys so much for coming. You guys are in for a real treat. I just finished my copy last week. It's amazing. I understand before we take some questions that you want a group photo. So
yes, we have to do our selfie. For
yes,
those of you that were with us last time.
So I'm going to ask everybody to stand up and hold your book up like this. Oh my God. Sure, everybody looked amazing. Now with all the formalities out of the way, we'll get right into things. So
it's a good-looking crowd.
You are so busy. I mean, if you can't tell, she's doing 100 different things, and she's also an incredible mother. So I want to know, what was the motivation behind this project? But more importantly, why did you feel like these stories are from across history? Why was now the time to tell them?
So the publisher had been on me for a while, saying that he wanted me to write this book. And he said, there's all these books on male leaders, but we don't have any books on female leaders. And I kept saying, I'm too busy, I can't do it now. And then I was thinking, when I was younger, growing up in rural South Carolina, town of 2,500 people, 2 stoplights, you couldn't think about doing something wrong without somebody already telling your mom. And, you know, growing up, I was always looking for women leaders, and I didn't see any. And so I would go to the library when I was in 2nd grade and check out books, and the only books that I could find were books on first ladies.
So I would read the stories of First Ladies, and I loved how they partnered with their husbands. I loved how behind the scenes they really did things that moved the country forward. And so then I thought, I have to write this book, because I don't want any little girls sitting there doing what I was doing in second grade saying, we need more books, we need more books. So, I started with one of my favorites, Margaret Thatcher, and the book is from a quote she would say, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman. So I started with that one and, just loved reading about her. And then I, included Jean Kirkpatrick. She was my predecessor, first female UN ambassador. And, she would always say she wasn't personally tough, but you couldn't tell it on the world stage because she was amazing at the way she defended America. But she would complain. She came in as a Democrat under Reagan. But she would complain about the fact that all this anti-Americanism, she didn't like it. And she ended up switching parties because she said that she felt like Democrats always blamed America first. And you think back all these years later, and we're still talking about the same thing. So, there were lots of women in there that we got to, research and profile. And what I hope at the end of the day is, as a mom, we all know that if you raise strong girls, they become strong women, and strong women become great leaders. And so I hope that all of you will, for your daughters and your granddaughters and your sisters and your mothers and your grandmothers, you'll give them this book and remind them that when we work hard and prove we deserve to be in the room, amazing things happen. And we need our women to step up. We really need them to put the most that they've got into this country, because this country needs them right now more than ever.
Exactly. I think you touched on something really special there. If you walk through the library, like so many of you have, and I know you did tonight in part at least, one of the first quotes you hear from President Nixon, some audio, is that it's about the American dream. And he says, I believe in the American dream because I have seen it come true in my own life. And Ambassador, I know you have as well. What makes America such an exceptional place to live, and how do we keep that exceptional dream alive for the next generation, like your incredible children?
Well, and that's what I think bothers me the most, is this national self-loathing that we're seeing is killing us. People saying that we're an oppressed country, that we're a racist country, that we're a bad country. We're not. If we were a racist country, I wouldn't have been elected the first female minority governor in the country. We are a special country, and I know when I was at the United Nations, the ambassadors would take me to the side, and they loved the fact that we had freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to do and be anything we wanted to be without government getting in the way. And we need our children and grandchildren to understand how incredibly blessed they are, that this is a special place. And what I saw at the United Nations is when we spoke, the world listened. When we led, the world followed. Who we are, the world wants to be. We have to remember who we want to be, because right now we just look so distracted, and we're better than this. And when we start to really focus on loving America again, that's when we'll start to see things self-correct.
So just a few weeks ago, Henry Kissinger was on the stage talking about really incredible leaders as well. Now we're lucky enough to have you talking about these 10 incredible women and these wonderful lessons in leadership. One thing I really loved is that they're all so different. They're from different chapters in history, and they did different things. And like you said, you say in the book, you don't look at their party, you really didn't look at anything. You looked at their story, and that their story inspired you. But again, they are all so different. But I was wondering if, when you were researching these incredible women, did you find any one characteristic that you think is unique to, like a leadership trait that they all share that we can all take as a universal lesson?
Well, and the book is not from a partisan slant. The book is very much from how did these ordinary women become extraordinary? And everyone was different. So you look at Margaret Thatcher, and here was a woman who was a grocer's daughter and was always underestimated. But she believed in Britain. But more than that, she believed in herself. And so she really led in a way that even when she took a lot of heat, she is the reason they erased 40 years worth of socialism in 10 years, was because she was so determined to see Britain through that. You look at someone like Claudette Colvin. She's someone, we all know Rosa Parks. We all know that Rosa Parks refused to get off the bus. She's a historic hero. But what people don't talk about is 9 months prior, a 15-year-old Claudette Colvin was the first one to refuse to get off the bus. She had been studying the Constitution in school, and when they tried to get her off the bus, she said, "No, it's my constitutional right." She was arrested, she was put in jail, but because they didn't think she came from the right social circles, because they thought she was a bit too fiery and emotional, they set it up for Rosa Parks to do it 9 months later, because she was a member of the NAACP, she was more mature, she was from the right social circles, and so that's how Rosa Parks ended up with the movement, but it was actually this 15-year-old girl that did it organically because she truly believed in it, and the courage that she showed. You know, then you look at someone like Virginia Walden Ford. Here was a woman who lived in a crime-ridden area of DC, and we know with our children, we have one job. One job is to make sure that we get it right. And she was so worried about her son's education. And she would say it's the segregation of our time that our children are educated based on where they're born and raised, not based on the fact that they deserve a good education. And they had terrible public schools. And so she fought, and she rallied parents around it. And the amazing thing is she testified all the way up until Congress, but she was terrified of public speaking. But her love of her son mattered more than that. And she was able to get school choice in DC and not just help her son, but help thousands of children. So these ladies were extraordinary because the one thing they did have in common was sheer will. The sheer will to not stop, the sheer will to not take no for an answer, the sheer will to say we've got to do this because no one else will.
That's really special. One of my favorite lines in the whole book, and there are a lot of favorite lines, but one of them was when you said, in a lot of the places where I was, there was never a long line for the women's bathroom. And it's totally changed the way that I see lines now. I'm like, you know what? I'm surrounded by other women. But how did you handle being in those spaces where a lot of times you'd look around and there was no one that looked like you?
You know, there were never any lines to the women's bathroom. I was, when I was elected to the state legislature, we were the lowest in the country on women elected officials. And then in corporate life, I was the only female on an executive board. And then when I became governor, I was the first female governor of South Carolina. And then on the Security Council in the United Nations, I was the only woman. But I never let that bother me. I always thought that, you know, I had to show them what it was that I was going to do. I had to show them what they needed to do to be with me. And so I'll give an example. When I got out of college, and I was the first female executive, or I was the only female executive for this company and 6 of its subsidiaries. I was an accounting supervisor, and we were getting ready for a meeting, and the CEO was running late. And he came running into the boardroom, and he said, "I'm sorry I'm running late." And the CFO looked over at me, and he said, "Nikki, will you get Paul a cup of coffee?" Right out of college. And I remember not knowing what I was going to do, but knowing that whatever I did was going to dictate how they treated me going forward. And so I said, "Absolutely." And I leaned to the table, and I called my assistant, and I said, "Kim, will you please bring Paul a cup of coffee?" They never asked me to do that again. But you know what I say is, you don't have to embarrass someone. You don't have to pitch a fit. Sometimes people just don't know. And so it's always good for you to kind of show them how they need to act and how they need to do things. And so, you know, I always tell women it's not what you do as much as how you do it, because that's how you're going to earn respect. And so when I was elected governor of South Carolina, I was the youngest governor in the country, and everybody in the legislature, they had all been elected when I was like 8. So, you know, here they were looking at, here's a girl, and she's young, and she doesn't know what she's doing. And so what I had to do was prove to them that I deserved to be in the room. And then with the Security Council, you know, you're up against all of these other countries, and I wanted them to know what America was for, and I wanted them to know what America was against. I didn't care if they liked me, but I wanted them to respect America. And so that's always how I've led going forward, is not focusing on me personally, but focusing on them and what I expect from them.
Well, unfortunately, it hasn't all been cups of coffee. Going through the book, you tell us about some really direct attacks on your character, a lot of them pertaining to your gender or your race that you've experienced throughout your career. I saw one a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure if folks in the crowd saw that as well, but a co-host of ABC's The View attacked you for changing your name to pass as white to help your political career, something you've never done, ever. You've always been so proud of your heritage, so it was horrible what she said, but how do you handle such direct attacks on your character and these horrible challenges?
Well, that's not the first time or the last time the ladies on The View are going to take issue with me. You know, I mean, look, I have always been very proud of my Indian heritage. I'm very proud of my parents. They came here with $8 in their pocket. There wasn't a day that went by that they didn't remind my brothers, my sister, and me how blessed we were to live in America. And so what they did on The View was they basically said Nikki wasn't my real name, that I was using it to pass as white. Nikki is actually on my birth certificate. However, the woman that said it, Sunny Hostin, Sunny is not on her birth certificate. Whoopi Goldberg, Whoopi is not on her birth certificate. But you know, whenever they come after you like that, that's when you know you're winning. Because they had nothing else to criticize me for, and so they picked at that. So I always look at it as a badge of honor. It means I'm doing something right.
You're doing a lot right. Yeah. I really do want to talk about this. These are 10 really incredible women, but we are at the Nixon Library, and I want to add an 11th, and that's First Lady Pat Nixon, who's just she's deserving of so much applause because she really was so special. She was the first of so many firsts, really she was. She was the first lady to ever go into active combat zone, Vietnam, where she visited orphanages and these wounded soldiers, these wounded American heroes. First first lady in Africa, and one of my favorites, first lady to throw out the first pitch at an MLB game. All of this, but so many people, they don't know this. They don't know about the path she paved for women that came after her. They don't know how special she was. So how do we bring women like Pat Nixon to the forefront of the woman empowerment movement?
You know, I think we have to talk about them. And that was the thing, is the hardest part is when you can only do 10. There are so many women that have really laid the groundwork for what's happened in the country. And that's why I loved reading those biographies of First Ladies, because these First Ladies really steered the country in directions during times of crisis, during times of success. They really brought out issues that mattered at the time and really gave us hope in so many ways. And so I think what's really important is when you see a successful woman, and I do this often, you know, when we got the first female leader of the stock exchange or the first female CEO at Citi, I always send them a note. And I always just say, you know, congratulations, you've got this, go. You know, and we should always go and keep encouraging women to be the best that they can be. And it's not that we shouldn't do it to the fellas too. I mean, we always, but men they always have this automatic support system. And women, it's just we're wired differently. We tend to second guess ourselves. We look for validation. We look for extra support. And what I always tell women is the most important thing you can do is learn to push through the fear. Because when we are faced with a challenge, we tend to step back. But when you lean into it and you push through the fear, you find out you're so much stronger on the other side. If I wouldn't have pushed through the fear, I wouldn't have run against a 30-year incumbent. in the legislature. If I wouldn't have pushed through the fear, I never would have run for governor. If I didn't push through the fear, I wouldn't have accepted the position as ambassador. When you push through the fear, you live life. If you don't push through the fear, you never know what could have been.
That's true. I know it's going to be hard to pick one, but who's one woman in your life that's helped you push through the fear?
Oh, my mom. I mean, hands down, my mom. And the reason is she was one of the first female judges appointed in India. But because of the times, she wasn't able to sit on the bench. And so, you know, to see all that she had done to become a lawyer and all that she had done to get this judgeship and not be able to do it, she inspired in her girls that it was important to be strong, and whatever you do, be great at it and make sure people remember you for it. And so it was a proud moment for her to see me sworn in as governor, because in this country, I could do what she couldn't do in India. And so I look at the strength and the courage and how she passed it on to us to really make a difference. That, I mean, she definitely, you know, they left wealthy lifestyles in India and came here with $8 in their pocket because they saw the opportunity of America. And I'll tell you, we take care of my parents. They're 87 and 89. They live with us. And still to this day, when we sit down for dinner, my parents are so upset about what's happening on the border because legal immigrants are so much more patriotic than most Americans these days. They came to this country because they understood the country was a country of laws. And, you know, if you give up being a country of laws, you give up everything this country was founded on. But they very much appreciate the blessings of being here. We just have to get everybody else to remember that.
Exactly. Well, when you say what we have here, that, you know, that's a reminder of what women don't have in other countries. And it's not fair, but one of the hardest chapters for me to read in this book was Nadia Murad's chapter, and you'll all be able to read that with her, but she was a part of the genocide of the Yazidis by the Islamic State of Iraq, and it's just brutal, and it feels even more painful given what's happening right now in Iran and Afghanistan. And there's a really powerful quote that you include from Nadia. She said, "I want to be the last girl in the world with a story like mine, but it's abundantly clear now that she is not." What do you want Americans to understand about what's happening to women and girls in Iran and Afghanistan right now?
So first, just to give Nadia Murad her due, I met her at the United Nations. And that chapter, I will warn you, that chapter is a really difficult chapter to read, but it's so important because she came, again, a humble Yazidi community, and ISIS came in, killed her family, took her as a sex slave, and she went through unbelievable torture. But she got out of it, and had she gone and just been at peace in her life somewhere or just never looked back, everybody would have understood. But she was so determined to hold them accountable. So she came to the United Nations and she was pleading for us to start looking at the evidence that these ISIS members did on the Yazidi community. And she fought and she won. They are now collecting evidence. She's been able to see her captors be held accountable, and she won a Nobel Peace Prize because she continues to fight for human rights around the world. And so, you know, her story is amazing. What you see in Iran is heartbreaking because the Iranian people have always wanted more. They don't want to be under the Iranian regime. And what you have is, you've got Mahsa Amini, who is this 22-year-old girl, and the morality police in Iran, it wasn't even that she wasn't wearing her headdress. She just wasn't wearing it fully. You could see some of her hair. So they got her, they took her, arrested her, beat her, and killed her. And the Iranian women just were done. And so we're seeing protests like we've never seen in Iran before. This is different because not only are the Iranian women showing courage and getting out there, They're taking off their headdresses. They're cutting their hair. Men are joining them in that fight. And it's actually, even today, it's gotten more brutal. I mean, they are killing these women, they're killing these people, and all they want is freedom. And we should support them in their fight because every person deserves to know what it feels like to be free.
Every person does deserve to understand and feel freedom. It's a universal human right, and it's really hard to watch that be taken away from people like we're watching right now in Ukraine. And I know you walked through the Cold War exhibit, the new Cold War exhibit at the library. I did too, and it's surreal now with all that we know about Putin's brutal war of choice in Ukraine, and as well as all we don't know about what the future looks like in that region. So given your wealth of experience, what can you tell us about that conflict?
So what I can first tell you is we would not have this war between Ukraine and Russia had we not had the debacle in Afghanistan. I mean, it's just hands down, that's... I'm the wife of a combat veteran. He served in Afghanistan. The idea that we left Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our friends. More importantly, think about what that told our enemies. And then do you remember when Russia hacked the pipeline and the food processing plant? They didn't do that to destabilize us. They did that to see how we would react. What'd we do? Nothing. Then you've got us falling all over ourselves to get back into the terrible Iran deal, a #1 state sponsor of terror that says death to America every day, and America's not even allowed in the negotiating room, and the country that we have as our lead negotiator is Russia. So we're allowing one enemy to negotiate with another enemy for us. All of the enemies and haters of the West see blood in the water. And that's when they decided to move. And so you look at the war in Ukraine, it is so much more than just a war about Ukraine. This is a war for freedom, and it's a war we have to win. You look at the inspiration of these Ukrainians. I mean, here the fathers leave their wives and their children to go fight for their country. The women are making Molotov cocktails to help them. Everybody only gave them 4 or 5 days to survive. But because of their sheer will of wanting to be free, they have now started gaining ground. We need Ukraine to win because the one lesson in all of this is when a tyrant says they're going to do something, we need to believe them. When Putin said he was going to take Ukraine, he did. When China said that they were going to take Hong Kong, we watched it happen. When Putin says Poland and the Baltics are next, we better believe him. When China says Taiwan belongs to them, it's not if, it's when. So when you look at what's happened with what Putin has said, if Ukraine doesn't win, he will move into Poland and the Baltics. Then you have a world war because you're dealing with NATO countries. That's what we don't want. Now, that doesn't mean we give them blank checks. We should absolutely not be giving them money. It does mean we should work with our NATO allies and make sure they have everything they need to defend themselves. Putin is losing. He knows he's losing. When you go, he's lost the faith of his people. He's lost the confidence of his military. They've increased the draft age in Russia now to 65. They've had at least 200,000 to 300,000. I know everybody's thinking about their age right now, aren't you? They've had 200,000 to 300,000 of their own citizens leaving, trying to get out of Russia. So you've got a situation where he knows he's in trouble, and he knows he's hit rock bottom when you're getting drones from Iran and rockets from North Korea. But this is not, and I know he's talking about nuclear weapons. Is he dangerous? He can be. But does that mean we run for the hills? Absolutely not. You keep your foot on the gas. You let him know if he does anything, there will be hell to pay. You put pressure on his partners, China and Iran, and say if you support his rhetoric, then you're just as bad. They will get him to back down. He's looking for an out. He's never going to wave the white flag. But he's now, and all he's doing, this is stalling. He's just stalling, trying to buy time. That's why he's putting more soldiers out on the front lines. He's trying to figure out what to do. But we just have to make sure we suffocate him enough that Ukraine can win. And then if Ukraine wins, okay, let's wait 1 second. We need to get some help here. Can we get her some water? Is there a doctor by chance? Or a nurse? Farther in, they can hear you better, yeah. Oh, God bless the people helping her right now. I appreciate that. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate that.
Bit of a scary moment here, but I think everybody's okay.
Yes. So we were talking about Russia and Ukraine. And so look, this is a fight that we have to win. Because if we win this fight, this will send a huge message to Iran, to North Korea, and most importantly, China. And that's why we have to make sure that we finish this.
just building off that, I think we've sent quite a message here, and not the right one. If you look at what was happening 50 years ago with President Nixon, we were opening China. He was in the Kremlin. He was in China. We had panda diplomacy. We were bringing back pandas as a sign of goodwill between us and other nations. We were the greatest country in the world, and we still are. But is that the message that we're sending right now?
We're not sending it. And I think, the other thing is you have to change with the times. You look at Republican and Democrat presidents thought for a long time that if we were nice to China, China would want to be like us. China doesn't want to be like us. They want to be communist China. We have to shift the way we treat them. And that hasn't happened up until now. And we need to see them for the threat that they are. And I think that America has to learn that you shift as threats shift, you shift, and you keep moving forward and not just assume that we do the old same things that we've always done and think that they're going to work this time.
Well, they always say, be the change you want to see. So while we still have you, I want to just, where do you see yourself 10, 5, maybe 2 years down the road?
So right now, along with this book tour, I have been all over the country helping House candidates, Senate candidates. We've got 36 governor's races we've been very involved in. And it's important, the way I look at it from a Republican standpoint is if we don't win in November, there is no 2024. So that's why all the attention has gone there. I don't have to make a decision, I think, until after January. If it looks like there's a place for me, I've never lost a race. I'm not going to start now. We'll put 1,000% into it and we'll finish it. And if there's not a place for me, I have fought for this country as long as I can remember, and I'll do it until my last breath.
All right. Well, looks like we're getting ready to take some audience questions here, but I just want to make sure today I know that you're on your Iron Lady, you're on your Iron Lady tour. And this is one stop on it. It's a really special stop because today is the Iron Lady's birthday, Margaret Thatcher. She would be 97.
Yes.
My last question before we get some audience questions here is, what does it mean to be an Iron Lady?
I think to be an Iron Lady means that you are strong, that you understand that your job is to help lift up everyone and make life better for everyone around you, that we're not victims. We don't need quotas. We don't need special treatment. We just need opportunity. And when opportunity shows itself, we do everything we have to prove that we deserve to be in the room. And there's nothing wrong with Iron Ladies being feminine. There's nothing wrong with Iron Ladies being great wives and great moms. And there's nothing wrong with Iron Ladies, showing emotion in that process as well. I think we need to be who we are. I think we need to be comfortable in our skin. And I think we need to understand when women do things, we're just great at it.
An Iron Lady.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ambassador Nikki Haley and Blake Kernan, thank you, ladies, very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have some questions from the audience, and I'm looking at this first one, and it made me think of my own daughter. I have a 4-year-old daughter at home, and I can't express how important it is for them all to have a copy of this book. I bought one for her, and I got it autographed. We have them for sale up in the store that are autographed. Please pick up a copy. But you are an absolute inspiration, Ambassador Haley. You really are. And I've been collecting these books at every speaker we have. And so when my children are old enough to appreciate them, they will have a library by significant speakers such as Ambassador Nikki Haley. So our first question that made me want to say that and give a little plug to my daughter is from Amy Hobbs. Amy wants to know, what actions can you take as a very young person to improve your community as a leader?
I think the biggest thing is to know that we need you. And we need you in whatever it is you're passionate about. It doesn't have to be politics. It could be education. It could be helping the poor. It could be whatever you think. But when you do something, be great at it and make sure people remember you for it. That's the biggest lesson my parents taught me, and I think it's the biggest lesson for any young person is don't start something and not finish it, but actually whatever you do, be great at it and make sure that people are still talking about you after you've finished it.
Absolutely, thank you. This one is from Heidi Stubb. We saw you on Gutfeld the other night in the 5. How much fun is it to be on those shows?
So Gutfeld is interesting, but it was a lot of fun. You know, it's fun. We interview, you know, with different anchors all the time, and to be able to be in that setting, like the 5, where you have like a full-on conversation, or with Gutfeld, where you can just kind of make fun of yourself and have fun. Both of them were great, and I always love doing those shows, so it's great.
Gutfeld's a common guest speaker here, and he is a ton of fun. Our next question, what was your most nervous time having to speak in public?
Oh, that's interesting. I can tell you my most nervous time having someone else speak in public. Does that count? So there was, we had, when I first got to the United Nations, we had what's High Level Week. It's 1 week out of the year. Every delegation from all over the world comes in to give their foreign policy speech, and this was President Trump's first foreign policy speech. And so, you know, we were setting up meetings for him, getting everything set up, and he called me the Sunday before, and he said, all right, Nick, are we ready? And I said, yes, sir, we've got all your meetings lined up. And he said, did you read my speech? And I said, I did. It was really good. And I said, but Mr. President, I just need to give you kind of some background of what you're walking into. And I said, the United Nations is a different kind of place. I said, so when you speak, it's serious. And he said, I got it. And I said, no, it's not like a rally. They're not going to cheer for you. I said, I want you to think of it like church. He said, church, got it. He said, but I wanted to ask your advice on something. And I said, what? And this is when North Korea was testing ballistic missiles like every other weekend. He said, what do you think if I refer to Kim Jong-un as Little Rocket Man in the speech? And I said, did you hear the part I said about church? He said, I know, but I tweeted it out this morning and it killed with the base. So fast forward to Tuesday, where he's giving the speech, North Korean delegation in the front row. He gets up there and he says it. That's where I was really nervous. So he said it, and then all of a sudden there's silence. And keep in mind, everybody's got their translator pieces in, and you just see everybody go. And then they started to laugh. So 2 hours later, I'm meeting with the president of Uganda, and he says to me, so tell me, Madam Ambassador, what are we going to do about this little rocket man? By the end of the week, every dignitary was sitting there referring to Kim as Little Rocket Man, so it like worked.
Thank you for sharing that story. Okay, next question. What was your greatest personal challenge, and what do you see as the greatest challenge for the United States?
Greatest personal challenge. So, yes, jobs have always been difficult, but the most recent greatest personal challenge was after I left the United Nations, I have an inability to be comfortable. I have always pushed myself to be uncomfortable. And so I always knew I couldn't run. I just assumed I couldn't run. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to figure out how to run. I'm going to learn how to run. And so I started, and as intimidating as it was and as scary as it was, I ended up running a half marathon last December. And so now I love to run, and that's something that just helps me, and it was just a really great personal challenge of mine. You know, from a professional challenge, we've got lots of different challenges that I think we have to deal with. But one that I dealt with at the United Nations that I hope that we can continue to look at is after we moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. And thank you. And America was condemned, and I was proud to do the first American veto in several years for that. Well, then it went to the General Assembly of 193 countries, and they condemned us too. And we were able to keep 68 countries from voting against us, which, believe it or not, that was a win. And when I came back to the office, I told my staff, I said, I want you to come up with a book. And in this book, I want you to list all 193 countries. I want the second column to be the percentage of times they vote with us and vote against us. And then I want the last column to be the amount of foreign aid we give them. I took that book and I gave it to the president. He lost his mind. He was like flipping pages. And what I told the president was, I said, look, I'm not saying we should give foreign aid based on a percentage vote at the UN, but that should be one of the factors we look at. We have to stop being a country that thinks we can buy friends. You can't buy friends. We have to stop giving money to countries that say death to America. We were giving $1 billion in military aid to Pakistan, and they were harboring terrorists that were trying to kill our soldiers. We stopped giving that $1 billion to Pakistan. And what I hope is that the United States realizes that this is not about buying friends. This is about being strategic. If there's a small country that wants to work with us and wants to help us from a national security perspective, we should partner with them. If there's another country that wants to go and see if we can work on manufacturing together, we should do it. But for all these countries, when I was at the United Nations, they'd love to poke us in the back. They'd love to backstab us and talk bad about us, but then they'd have their hand out. We've got to quit being silly and giving this money. We need to start being smart and strategic as we go forward.
Okay, this next question is from Emma, who's 14 years old. What was it like to be ambassador to the United Nations and to be in so many important positions? I am 14 years old, and I am wondering what advice you would have for me, since I am interested in being involved in government in the future and working to make our great country even better.
Oh, Emma, first I will tell you we need you. We need you, and I want you to keep working hard to make that happen. What I will tell you is I want you to know who I was before governor and before ambassador. So I grew up in that small rural town. We were the only Indian family. My father wore a turban. He still does to this day. My mother wore a sari. We weren't white enough to be white. We weren't black enough to be black. They didn't know who we were, what we were, or why we were there. And I remember when I would get teased on the playground, and I would come home, and my mom would say, your job is not to show them how you're different. Your job is to show them how you're similar. And it's amazing how that lesson on the playground played out throughout my life, whether it was in the corporate world or as governor or as ambassador, is those challenges you go through, that's what makes you good. Don't run from challenges. Realize what you learned from those challenges. I didn't know I was going to be a governor. I didn't know I was going to be an ambassador. But how did I start out? Just a little brown girl that was getting teased on the playground. If I can do that, Emma, you can do whatever you want to do and be successful at it.
Okay, we have time for one last question. How do we get our country back on the right track?
So, I think the biggest thing we have to do is truly that national self-loathing has to stop. We have to snap out of it. You know, the idea that we've got critical race theory and you're telling a little girl that goes into kindergarten, if you're white, you're bad, and if you're brown or black, you'll never be good enough and you'll always be a victim. The idea that we have guys playing in women's sports. I mean, it's the biggest women's issue of our time, is that we're doing something like that. We have to start really getting back to the basics and what it means. We need to know that capitalism is the greatest source for lifting people up out of poverty in the history of the world. And the biggest part of it is we look so distracted right now. The rest of the world is looking at us going, what is happening? And when America's distracted, the world is less safe. But we are gonna be okay. We're gonna be okay, because I believe sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to know where up is. We're there. And I also believe that America has an amazing ability to self-correct. But it's gonna take every single one of us kind of pulling up our bootstraps saying, okay, it's time, let's do this. And I think that we're gonna end up seeing our finest hour.
Ambassador Haley, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, she is author of Something If You Want Something Done. Copies are available in the store. They are autographed. Pick one up on your way out. Thank you for coming. God bless you all. God bless America. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.